On February 9th of 2004, 21-year-old UMass Amherst student Maura Murray disappeared in the White Mountains of New Hampshire in one of the most perplexing mysteries of our time.
For years, we have covered Maura's case and the tireless online community that surrounds it in great detail. We have since expanded our mission with this series, raising awareness and shining a light on the stories of other missing persons.
We now sit on the board of directors of the nonprofit organization Private Investigations for the Missing, which was founded by Bruce Maitland. Bruce's daughter, Brianna Maitland, went missing from Montgomery, Vermont on March 19th of 2004, just 6 weeks after and about 80 miles away from where Maura Murray vanished.
Private Investigations for the Missing aims to assist with investigations for underserved families whose missing loved ones have been forgotten by the media or by law enforcement. Through our growing community, we hope to shed a light on these cold cases.
Families and loved ones can reach out to us at investigationsforthemissing.org. This is Missing. Welcome back to Missing. I'm Tim, here today with Lance. Lance, how are you today?
I am doing wonderful today, Tim. How are you?
I'm doing great too, Lance. And in this episode, we speak to a lot of our friends. We speak to Bruce Maitland, Chloe Canter, Greg Overacker, Lou Barry, and Kira, Brianna Maitland's old friend. This was recorded on March 17th. It was a Thursday night. We did it live, True Crime Thursday on Get Vocal, about Brianna Maitland's disappearance. This evening commemorated her 17-year anniversary, if you will, of her disappearance.
Always a challenging time for the family and the friends of someone who is still missing, someone who doesn't have the answers, very, very limited amount of information. And that is such the case with Brianna Maitland and Bruce Maitland, who is generous enough to give us his time and then provide us with some stories that he at one time said he would never tell, but he felt like he owed it to the people who have been supporting him and Brianna and the nonprofit Private Investigations for the Missing. These people have been supporting him in his head for so long that he owed it to them, even though he doesn't owe anybody anything, but it was incredibly gracious of him to recall these stories of Brianna sledding and being told to not do something and she would do it anyway, and her willfulness and her energy and just the spark that she provided when she walked in a room. And Bruce went right into those stories. And again, it was something that he had previously said he would never do. So really important to take the time to hear him and to understand that this is somebody who has moved on to another level of acceptance and grief. And he's embracing the support and the community that all of you listeners and everyone that was in the Get Vocal room are giving to him. It's literally giving him strength.
And you said he jumps right in, and you're not kidding. The first thing that we play after the music here is Bruce. As soon as the night started, we sort of introduced him, and he just went into it. He must have been thinking about what to say and about what stories to recall for a day or two, because that's what it seemed like. He just kind of opened up. So yeah, we were all lucky to bear witness to that and hear these stories, and they're heartwarming, but they also tell a lot about Brianna as a person. So it's also really interesting to hear these stories about Brianna.
And we have, of course, Greg Overacker, who joined us, and really touching moment there between the two of them, recognizing the work that each other is doing for not only Brianna but other families. Seriously, this could have gone on until like midnight, and we would have been fine with it.
Yeah, and we'll end up breaking this episode into two parts because we don't want to cut anything. I mean, we could cut it to 40 minutes or whatever, but we'd like to play it all. So we're going to air it in two parts, and we hope you listen to both and hope you really enjoy it. All right, everybody, thanks a lot for listening. Follow us on social media at Missing CSM, and check out Private Investigations for the Missing at investigationsforthemissing.org.
I would like to go into a couple things that I've probably, never shared a lot of it, but I've always kind of avoided talking about Brianna. As you three know, I said that, those memories are mine. And, but I just want to kind of, I don't know, just in sort of a celebration of like who she was. Brianna was such a free spirit. When the kids were sledding one day, we were sledding down this long hill, and at the bottom of this hill was a barbed wire fence. Not probably the smartest thing to do in retrospect, but, I would always sled down to the bottom of the hill so that I could catch them, or particularly her. And this was when she was probably, I don't know, 5 years old. And, so we were kind of done, and then she wanted to go again, and we said no. And then she said, well, I guess I'm just going to go. And down she went, so it was like a real panic moment, not knowing whether she was going to stop by herself at the end of the fence. But luckily, even at that age, she had some sense enough to bail off. And then there was just, if you guys remember the picture of her in the kayak at some point, sometimes it shows up. Well, there was a time we were going kayaking, and her mom and I were in a canoe, and Brianna was in the kayak. And there was a dam there that we came up on that had an old dam, and had cracks in it where the water was racing through. And I suggested that we kind of get over to the edge of the river like we normally do and kind of look at it a little bit just before we could shoot down it. And of course, Brianna did not wait for that. And she just went down through that crack of the dam, knowing, not what was on the other side. And of course, it ended up obviously being fine, but she had a real good laugh at, mom and dad being scared to do that, and her having the nerve to kind of do that. So it was just, and that was kind of the way she was just really free spirited about her life. I remember she said, well, I got tired of sleeping in the bed. I don't want to sleep in a bed anymore. So she wanted a hammock. So we bought her a hammock. So she basically took the bed out of the room, and she slept in a hammock, and would just, spend a lot of time reading and things in the bedroom. But, just when she was outside, you just kind of never knew what she was getting into. One time in the middle of the winter, her and a friend, I forget which friend now, but they decided they wanted to camp out in the coldest weather they could just to see how rough it was. So I think it was probably, it was at least 20 below zero that night. And, so they set out there, and, they went out in the tent and sleeping bags, and they made it. I went out to check on them. And I mean, they didn't camp like right next to the house too. Oh no, they had to go out in the woods, a quarter mile, and camp out there somewhere where it's not easy to get back. So, I mean, it's just, her grandfather had an old Jeep, which right after he passed, the Jeep kind of came to us. This was a 1975 CJ5. Well, she had to learn how to drive that. And it was, I was really dubious about that. I mean, no doors, no nothing on that Jeep, seat belts. But yeah, I let her take it out, close to home, at least, which I knew about anyhow. But she would go out and run that Jeep, and then, on nice days, they would drive the Jeep or a car down. We lived at the end of a mile-long driveway, so she would drive that and park it there, and then, when school was over, bus would leave her off, and she'd drive the Jeep back and stuff. So it was just kind of she was just very, very free spirited, and just a wonderful, endearing way. And, I probably let her get away with a lot of that free spiritedness because it was so endearing. And, up until she disappeared, it's just, bad things weren't happening as a result of a lot of that kind of action. But it was just wonderful when she would come into a room. She had a very much, which photos don't really capture, but she had a natural grace and poise when she would walk into a room, and just carried herself, and people would look and be amazed. And when they talked to her, because she was so well read, it was just very conversational and all that. And I miss her dearly.
You said that she was so well read. Where did she get that? Was that something that she picked up on her own? Did she have a particular genre that she liked to read, or was it everything?
Pretty much, she was just a real reader from the time she could read, from the kids' books right on up through, and we would read books. Both, her and my mom would read books. I remember, we read Heidi, and we read. I can't think of the name of the book with a spider in it that talked.
Charlotte's Web.
Yeah, Charlotte's Web, and we would just read that sort of stuff, and then she was kind of like me in the sense of my reading habits are where I find something that's of interest to me, and I'll read quite a bit on that, and then move on to something else. So it was just a real diverse amount of books, and at the time, we were living off grid. We made our own electric and power and that sort of thing, but one thing we didn't have is a TV. And we had a TV, but we would just rent movies or something like that on a weekend night or weekend night, and it was kind of like a plan watching thing. So during the week there was no TV. So and that's something that I never felt that there was other things about living there isolated that she obviously did not like. The availability of friends and things like that as she got a little older, but. The reading was not having a TV didn't bother her. We were a reading family, and except Waylon never read pretty much anything other than whatever magazines he was kind of strumming through. But she was very much like me in her reading.
When you were talking about the sledding, you said that you kind of told her, maybe don't do that, and she said, sort of like, okay, well, I'm going to do it anyway. What's your reaction to that? Is it just like, it's just too endearing to get mad at that point?
Well, I think in that particular instance, it's like, you're kind of panic stricken and running down the hill after, like it would really do any good, but you would get there quicker if something was wrong. But, by the time you get there, everything's safe and everybody's laughing, and, it's all okay. You could lecture her, but I'm not sure it did any good.
What about sports? I think we often hear that she was into jujutsu, but recently heard that she did more than one martial art. And were there any other sports that she participated in?
Just jujutsu, and that was I think she did probably at least a year of that, maybe more. And she was the only young girl in the jiu-jitsu class. It was mostly these, husky guys that were in great shape, and it was kind of fun to watch her fight them, because obviously they were, letting her get away with stuff, or at least letting her try the moves that they were teaching her to see whether it would work, But she was, quite athletic in that sense, the jiu-jitsu sense.
Yeah, and how did she do against the boys or the men? She held her own?
Not in a real sense, no. These guys were, 200-pound guys in the fit in the prime of their lives. So, they would let her try the moves on them, and she could get a hold of them right. She could, maybe send them off their feet. But
and who encouraged her to do that, or was that her own?
That was her own. There was a little studio. A guy opened up a studio in Enosburg Falls, the town not too far away from us, and she was kind of interested in it and said she wanted to do it. So sure, I thought it'd be a good thing to have some kind of a good self-defense training. I thought, well, that's a great idea. Why don't we do it? And my son had boxed when he was a teenager, so it was like, well, he boxed, so she should be able to do jujitsu if she wanted.
I gotta say it's intimidating enough to be a male going into that environment, but being a young female and just walking into that environment, you don't know what it is. Like, it's a super respectful environment when you're there, but the anticipation is so stressful. When you first told us that she did that, I just was like, it just takes so long to even take that first step to go through the door as a male, as an adult male, let alone a 14 or 15 or 16-year-old female. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I don't think the pressure was that tough on her. I think it might have been tougher to go in as a male, because you were going to have to seriously tumble around and compete with these guys. And they were really sweet to her. All of them treated her really, really well, and it just made it an enjoyable experience for her.
Just hearing memories of Brianna, I feel just, indirectly charmed and graced by, her presence and just her wonderful memory. So thank you so much for that. I was wondering, I know you guys had cattle and you said you were off the grid. Were you on a farm? Did she enjoy that kind of farm lifestyle?
Well, at that time, we were living in the woods, off the grid, and we were sort of a, back to the lander homesteader type of a thing I was pretty seriously in the environmental movement, and I was really, really interested in the whole off-grid sustainable lifestyle thing. So we had 2 milking goats, and we had chickens and turkeys and things like that in the small area that we had, but that was pretty much woods. After Brianna went missing, we moved out of the area after some time, and that's when it was a regular farm.
What an interesting, I don't want to say it's a revelation, because we know that you lived in Vermont, sort of off the grid, but a lot of people say off the grid and they don't literally mean off the grid. They just kind of mean that they live in a small town, or they live in down a long driveway or something. But you wanted to be part of like a sustainable existence, like a self-sustainable existence. What got you interested in that?
As that stuff started to come out, I was just always interested in an alternative type energy. And then I read more on it. And then a property that was an acquaintance of mine happened to come up for sale that was ideally suited. So I ended up buying it. And then I put an addition on the place that was there. And being able to build the place around that concept of being off the grid requires that you do a lot of wiring changes and things like that. And we had solar panels for power and a battery bank and a what they call micro hydro, which is a little turbine that runs off of water in the creek, and that charges your batteries. And we had a huge wood cook stove that would heat the house, and you could just heat and cook off of it. People think of that existence as some kind of a real Spartan existence, but it really wasn't. I mean, you have conventional power. Everything changes to 110. You have your lights, you have your shower, you have your hot water, you have a regular sink. I mean, the only thing we didn't have up there was we didn't have the TV, no access to cable, and really not in a good area to get it from the air, so to speak. And we had probably one of the earlier cell phones in the area. We had phone service, and I actually had eventually I ran a phone line up just so I could get internet service. So I had that at the time. So it was different, but it wasn't like you were just living in a shack in the woods somewhere.
Bree's friend, like a couple of them have described her as a hippie, and I don't know if that was just because of the lifestyle or if she kind of possessed her own ideology, and I was wondering what you thought about that.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good description of her. I mean, back to the landering kind of comes out of the hippie movement. When the hippies went rural, they were back to the landers. So a little bit of that rubbed off on me, and you bet. And I mean, she was always decorating herself, the type of a flowers in her hair or doing things like that.
And now private investigator Greg Overacker pops on the screen, and I ask Bruce about his closest investigators, Greg Overacker and Lou Barry. And Bruce, these two fellows have been a part of your journey in investigating this case for a while now. I guess, can you tell us real quick, I mean, what they mean to you and what their work has meant?
Well, it's kind of embarrassing to tell Greg what I feel about him when I have to look at him right there. But Greg's just been absolutely wonderful. I mean, we've been good friends, and he is just Greg has done so much for me that he doesn't even realize a lot of times. I mean, it's somebody I can safely bounce a lot of things off. Greg never lets go, has never turned his back on me, and he's experienced a lot of the same frustrations that I have through all these years, and he's still there. And I just think the world of Greg. I mean, he's a brother to me.
I was up early this morning, and I watched what you guys posted. I was going to comment on there. Had we had the money, and that's how this whole thing between Bruce and I got started about PIs for the missing. Had Bruce had the money, I would have moved to Vermont. I would have been living in a Holiday Inn up there. I would have never left. Honest to God, I would have. And I'd do it now. I mean, where I live now, my family's all gone. This is what I do. Absolutely, I'd do it, Bruce. I would. I love you, and we're in this together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in.
Yeah, many years ago you said that.
Yeah.
It's all held true.
I still go by that whole thing that if I was up there every morning and at 8 a.m. I was knocking on doors, which I'd be doing every day, it'd be a whole different ball game. And you talked about in that 20-minute segment about the way the kind of the police handle things. And and you said it too, we're not necessarily putting down the police. It's the way that functions. It's the way the job functions. And I've worked with police before and gone and worked with them for a couple of days at a time. And it's a job, and they go in the morning and they get their coffee and they have a meeting, and then they go to an interview, and the person doesn't show up for the interview, and they drive back to the barracks, and it's lunchtime, and whereas me, I'm out for the day. It's like when we were bounty hunters, we would go out, we'd leave home, we'd get in my car and drive south. You're not talking about driving south for 100 miles, you're driving south for 1,000 miles. And I'm coming back with the package, and that's it. There's no two ways about it. I'm either finding you, I'm throwing you in jail, or I'm finding you dead and getting the death certificate or something. But it's going to result in a paycheck. And I think if that attitude was something that they had, or they can't, it's not built to function that way. You know what I mean? If it was built to function that way, whole different ballgame. So that's unfortunate. Don't get me going. We had dinner the other night, and we were both just ranting and raving. The shit if I lost my marbles publicly, it would be awful. It would just be awful, man.
I want to say
we're in a Denny's, and I'm like, ah!
I want to say it's always good to have somebody like Greg on your side, somebody who sends you a picture of this
brass knuckles
as my birthday present.
Yeah, got him with a note that says, "Got myself a little something today." So anybody who you're in good hands when that's the type of person who feels comfortable enough to, on one hand, send a text message with brass knuckles, and on the other hand, say, "I would have lived. I'd be up there right now, living there to help you." You guys are like brothers. It's incredible to see that happen.
I mean, it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating for him. I mean, it's frustrating for you guys. It's frustrating for me. I don't even know how to express it properly.
Well, the frustrating part is having to triage everything with limited time. You just have to, we'll try to work on, this particular person or this particular scenario. And it's really, really hard to do. And that's why these people need help all over. That's, part of the missions of private investigations is, it's just people shouldn't be in the position that I'm in. We do criticize the police a lot of time, and it's the system and the way they've worked and the way they have to work. Maybe somebody gets shot down the street, they've got to take care of that now. And that means that something else doesn't get done. and like any organizations, you have people that are top notch and dedicated and will go all out, and then you have ones that aren't, and it's like any kind of a government type system. It just doesn't
Think
always
about
work the
having
way
a
it's
job.
supposed to work.
Your work backs up for years. Can you imagine that? Like someone comes to you and goes, "Oh, by the way, that was something left over from last week, but we have stuff from years ago. We're just going to keep piling on your desk." You're only one person. You can only do so much physical activity. Not only that, look at all the functions that the police carry out. I mean, it's everything from murder investigations to directing traffic. I mean, how much more can you pile on their plate? At the same time, frustration grows where, we had a situation where someone had been interviewed. They were like, "Well, we're going to follow up on the interview." Okay, when? Oh, well, in a couple months or a month or whatever. Why are you waiting a month? You would think that as the passage of time went by, it would get more urgent, not less. And then when they wait that long, in one particular instance, I was beside myself with Bruce saying, this person's going to die. It's, they're older, they've got drug problems. This person's going to die. Sure enough, they died. You waited until it was just too late. And that's a huge aggravation. When we find that out, then you just want to slam the phone down and go bang your head on a wall because you can't get them. And then you're like, well, next time I'm not waiting for them because they're just going to put it off. I got to tell you, Erica Franlick's case, at some point, I'm just going to blow my stack. They've done nothing. Well, they don't do much. Of course, I'm not in the inner loop either. Anyway.
We have sort of the trifecta on right now. Chief Lou just joined us, and he definitely has his ominous uplighting, which is fantastic. So thank you for bringing that to the table. But I love the fact that it comes from all angles. Like, it comes from all sides with Greg and Bruce and Lou from the law enforcement side. We hear it all the time, Lou. We hear it all the time that once the departments have something more urgent coming up. I mean, they just said, Bruce said, someone gets shot down the street. That's a priority. That's a priority right now. And then that turns into, well, who shot this person, and it so on and so forth. How does this not continue to be the story over and over again, especially in small towns? And thank you for joining us.
It is the story over and over again.
But why? Is there any solution? Is there like another agency that can step in, or is there maybe an agency that hasn't been developed yet?
I think to give these cases the time that they need, you have to have a unit dedicated just to working on these cases. And if that's done, it's usually done on a statewide basis. And now they're overwhelmed with the number of cold cases that they have. We just don't have the resources, or the police don't have the resources to spend the time on these. And I'm seeing it now. Even now, I don't do this full time, but I've got like 5 cases going, and I find myself saying, "Well, this one can wait a bit because I have to do this on this case." So even just doing that limited number, you have to prioritize things, and things fall by the wayside. It almost seems like it's hard to devote your full attention to more than one case at a time. And there's no way you could afford to have one investigator do just one case exclusively. It just doesn't practical. It doesn't work that way.
So is it more like public outreach? I think Jason says here in the chat, public policy and advocacy. Is that something that is like an element that law enforcement will lean on in a serious way, like putting the call out to the public to help them?
What I would like to see is legislation that after a certain period of time, be it 5 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, or whatever, a case that's going nowhere be shared, if you will, with the family. And if the family has the resources to hire a private investigator, or an organization like Bruce's could step in and say, okay, we'll look at this case now and turn over the files and let them look at it. I mean, there are certain cases, obviously, that would be appropriate, but otherwise, no one looks at it. We look at the Framlich case. If Greg hadn't found that case and resurrected it, no one would be looking at that case.
They're not going to work that aggressively enough. You don't figure this shit out by sitting home or sitting in your office. You don't.
For a law enforcement agency to dedicate an officer and say, okay, you're taking this case, we're not working on anything else. If it's a cold case, it isn't going to happen. So
right.
if they can't do it, Let the private sector do it. Brianna's case literally fills a room with files. I mean, there must be 20 boxes, full big boxes of files. So someone coming in and taking over that case now literally has to go through all those files just to find out what's been done in the past.
That's got to be awful to walk into. That's got to, how do you, I don't know, how do you take a cop and put him in that room and go, okay, and then pile other shit on their desk at the same time, most likely, or at least they get up to speed.
And something's got to suffer, and you know what it is? It's the old case.
Yeah. That's awful.
So there's nobody that's really following that case from day one on. It changes hands, and sometimes you get a guy who does a great job, and nothing gets done in 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And real quick, I just want to say, you mentioned private investigations for the missing, and what they're trying to do is provide the resources for families to look for their loved ones, and that does take money. It takes money to pay someone like Greg to stay at that Holiday Inn for, a week or 10 days at a time. So if anybody wants to donate, you can go to investigationsforthemissing.org, and there's a donate here button. Every little bit helps. We've been trying to fundraise. This night wasn't supposed to turn into a fundraiser, but every little bit helps. And if anybody knows someone who can fundraise on a higher level, that's really one of the keys that has been missing in the internal kind of struggle that this organization has, is that we know the problem, we know the means to the solution. We know where the money is. It's just, how do you access that, and how do you write those letters to those people? So if anybody knows someone, reach out to us separately. You can find us on investigationsforthemissing.org. Just shoot an email over, and we'll definitely get back to you on that.